The DOJ now seeking to retry a convicted Florida healthcare fraudster who had his sentence commuted 3 years ago by then-President Trump. Can they do that? Philip S. Forms had gotten a 20-year sentence for his role in a $1.3 billion Medicare fraud scheme and was apparently living a lavish lifestyle in Miami Beach before his arrest in 2016. Exotic cars, private planes, stuff they do. Now he isn't accused of doing anything wrong since he was out of prison. Instead, the DOJ wants to retry 6 of the original counts against him, all of which ended in a hung jury. He was convicted of 20 others. The judge in the original case apparently factored the hung counts into his tough sentence, which was ultimately commuted, served about 4.5 years. The 6 criminal counts where the jury in 2019 reached no verdict include the most serious charge, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. S. Forms was convicted of, among other things, money laundering and bribery, all of apparently which helped him fund that lifestyle. At the time, it was said that S. Forms was found guilty in the largest healthcare fraud scheme ever charged by the U.S. Justice Department. Now remember, when there's a hung jury, the government can retry those charges in front of a new jury. But now he's going to argue that the clemency was intended to cover all of his wrongdoing and that they should not be able to retry him at all. S. Forms not your typical clemency recipient either. He wasn't a Trump donor, Republican loyalist, not a celebrity. But a memo obtained by the Washington Post reveals Attorney General Bill Barr advocated for the early release of the nursing home owner. A Jewish charity reportedly did as well. 3 years of supervised release and $44 million in fines and forfeiture orders not part of the commutation. Earlier, I sat down with Beth Reinhardt, investigative reporter at the Washington Post, who wrote the article titled "Fraudster Freed from Prison by Trump Faces Prosecution Under Biden." Obviously done extensive research on this case. So let me start by asking you why his sentence was commuted in the first place.
Well, that's a good question. The folks who argued for it, as you mentioned, that included Attorney General Bill Barr, but also some other former Justice Department officials, pointed to allegations of prosecutorial misconduct that were raised during his trial. A magistrate called the handling of attorney-client privilege documents deplorable. But the trial judge, although agreed, that there was wrongdoing, did not throw the prosecutors off the case, and the prosecution went forward. So that's one of the arguments that they were making for the commutation. The other one was just that they, felt he had been over sentenced. Essentially, he, a 20-year sentence. It is a long sentence, but as you pointed out, prosecutors did call this, one of the biggest frauds, or the biggest fraud that the department had ever gone after a single person for.
So from talking to experts, legal experts, does it sound to you like the DOJ can do this? Do most people believe that they can now retry him? Because I don't know. I haven't studied the issue. It seems like a close call to me. So I'm interested in what you've heard.
I think there are pretty reasonable arguments to be made on both sides. The prosecutors and in court hearings and in their briefs argue that because the commutation, did not cover those hung charges, it only applied to the counts of conviction, that those are free and clear and separate from the commutation. Obviously, as Formas's lawyers are and others in the criminal justice community who are worried about kind of a slippery slope, like if they can undo this commutation, what next? They argue that sort of the spirit of the commutation is to, have released him from prison. They're concerned about double jeopardy because, as you pointed out, the judge did consider the hung charges at sentencing. That is a little known power that federal judges do have to consider relevant conduct, and that isn't always convictions. It's a pretty interesting debate, and one that will be playing out in the courts at some point.
Yeah, Beth Reinhardt, fascinating article. I knew nothing about this case and became obsessed with it by reading your article. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.